Hey, Stink here. Today I want to talk about a game that I've kind of been playing in between my study sessions called Witchfire. What is Witchfire? Essentially, it is a early access game that is inspired by extraction shooters like Tarkov, along with having refined difficulty standards like Dark Souls with the animation stylings of Destiny. So essentially, it's like a BLT, but a video game. And most BLTs are pretty good. So when I say that Witchfire is a BLT, I'm probably thinking that it's a pretty good game, in which it is. But I'll talk more about the game itself. In Witchfire, in the world of Witchfire, you are a sinner looking for redemption, and as such, the church has taken you on as a redeem or like a sinner looking for redemption called a prayer in this dark fantasy world where essentially there's like these entities known as witches. They have taken over large amounts of Europe or maybe the world, and you go into areas that the church deemed to be the most dangerous, and you just clear them out as a prayer. If you die or you're tracked successfully, the area will respond with enemies, and with those enemies, prevent events that you cleared out, etc. I'll start with the positives of the game. The game runs extremely well. It's very much well optimized. There's lots of settings in the window in the graphic settings, and it is gorgeous 99% of the time, or maybe close to 90% of the time. My only gripe with the game is that sometimes some textures are just stuck loading, which that could be an Unreal Engine 4 issue. It runs great on the Steam Deck. If you lower the settings down, like say if you lock it to like 720p, you use TAAU or XCSS, it's going to look really good on the Steam Deck, especially on the OLED. And if you just use like a combination of to 40 FPS on the smallest map, and maybe on like the larger maps, it will dip down to like say 35. But honestly, that's not like the worst thing in the world. You can probably like say if you really want it locked, you can just set it to like 30 FPS and you're not going to have any issues. The sound design is great. All the weapons, they sound like what you think like a weapon should sound like shotguns, they sound beefy. The like stake gun, it sounds what you would think it would sound like. If you work like say in logging, you know what I'm talking about. The pretty much like standard, the I guess like the assault rifles sound pretty much like standard assault rifle stuff. I would say like everything sounds really good, especially the music. I think my favorite sound design tidbits here and there is the witch will set out traps, and some of these traps are like kind of like bear traps, and when you get close to them, they release like a snarling sound, and it's very unnerving. It makes sure that you are paying attention to the game world. The leveling system is pretty much addictive, and it's engaging, along with it being very much in depth. Leveling system. There are three sets of leveling systems: Gnosis, Ascension, and Mysterium. Gnosis is more or less like kind of like your difficulty scale adjuster, where if you on Gnosis 0, the game isn't that scary or dangerous. Gnosis 1, the game kind of picks up in difficulty. Gnosis 2, the game starts laying down traps, along with more paranormal enemies that are threatening. Like say, I think Gnosis 1 kind of introduces the Warden. In Gnosis 2, even if you beat the Warden will come back after a set amount of time. Calamities will increase in the world. That can also be tied to say like luck as well, in which that is in the more typical Dark Souls style Ascension leveling up. There are some issues I have with that. It's not as engaging as the Gnosis system is, primarily when it comes to say stats that honestly shouldn't really be there. And I can talk about that in the negatives. So I'll just move on from that. And the last but not least, it kind of ties into the weapon system is Mysterium. All the weapons, they have like just a baseline stat, but over time you unlock like the first one naturally called the Mysterium 1 stat, or just Mysterium 1, in which it will either come in the game or you can just buy it quickly in the church gear window, or mirror world portal, whatever it is. When you do that, there's like a set amount of like research time that you go to, so you can just play like clearing out a map, and then you come back and it should be done, give or take like what you are researching. When you do that, you attach like that Mysterium to the weapon, and that can increase like the weapon stats, the damage, or it will give you a set of active stats that you can use. Like say the painkiller inspired like Striga stick gun. When you on the third Mysterium, it will release like a shockwave that will inflame enemies in the area if you were to hit an enemy with it. And there's a shotgun in the game where if you slide, it will reload 2 shells and will give you a damage boost on one of the shells. The spells, they're awesome. They kind of play into the Mysteriums as well. My favorite set of spells are the lightning spells. You got to see it probably in the game, where first spell, you just simply like cast like a lightning ball and it will just go in a straight line. The second spell is, second lightning spell is like this giant cross that will bind enemies to it, and it will dish out like 1 to 5 DPS. And while you're doing that, you can just start just hammering home tons of damage, like tons of active damage to it, to the enemies that are tied to the cross. Events are pretty engaging and rewarding, especially when you get to the calamity system. Essentially, the witch, she's watching you, and if you start messing up or you're losing health, she'll basically start ready to spring a calamity on you. And this can also happen as well if you're picking up treasures in the map that is tied to the gold and how you can buy other Mysteriums and new weapons. If you get like five like unfortunate events in a row, or just use all your health, she can trigger a calamity in which you got to go to an area on the map and you just have to just clear out the calamity. The calamities are great for the most part. There are some things that I have grievances with, and I will talk more about that as well when I start talking about the negatives. Enemies are usually responsive and are dynamic. They say, like, for example, you basically shoot an enemy in the head, they'll stagger and be stunned, and then you can just start juggling your weapons and just dish out more damage. But at the same time, there could be like smaller enemies in the area that, at face value, they may not do a lot of damage, but if there's a lot of them, they can kill you all at once. So you got to make sure that you're always, just watching your environment and your surroundings, and just have fun when it comes to the areas. I really love the world and the history of Witchfire, at least like what they're setting up. My only gripe with it is that it's a little bit too big, especially when it comes to the more advanced systems. And I guess it's a good way to talk about what I find a neutral, and then like some of the more negative aspects. The neutral thing I can think of is that it's still in early access, which honestly, I'll say most games that are in early access, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're someone who is still cautious about early access, it's just something to keep in mind. But I guess now let's talk about the cons of the game. I say like 99% of the time the game looks good, and I mentioned the texture's not popping in. Another thing too, and this only really affects people with high-end computers, is that the gameplay, the frame rate can be inconsistent. Like say you could be hitting like a constant 80 or 60 or 70, and then suddenly it would just drop down to like 5 FPS because of a stutter, or the game would just freeze up momentarily. And that could be just tied to the fact that Windows isn't scheduling things like it should. That's the only thing I can think of right off the bat. The other thing that kind of has been growing on me a little bit is the RPG stat system. So stuff that I think that shouldn't really be tied to it is, say, the stamina system. Or there shouldn't really be a stamina system, because it is going to be a movement-based shooter, and you want to make sure that you are always mobile. And I think a good way to like counteract the lack of a stamina is to have enemies that move quickly, or just have more enemies for you to deal with. Kind of like how Doom Eternal or Doom 2016 just dishes out large amount of enemies in waves. And since there is like a wave system baked into the dangerous areas, I can see like just adding maybe 2 extra waves could be helpful. Reorganized defenses can be a pain when you level up. So like say when you leave an area and you level up, the witch will reorganize her defense, which can be an issue if, say, there is a fixed spawn point. Like the third map is a fixed spawn point. At least it's always been fixed for me. I may have a point where it may have spawned me somewhere else in the castle area, but it's always been close to the battlefield 99% of the time for me. And if I reorganize and a witch reorganized defense, there's a good chance that there could be a extremely dangerous area by me that will just kill me outright, because when you're analysis 2 in that area is just super dangerous, especially when the warden comes through. And it's already bad enough that you're fighting like a third wave enemies, and they could be a bunch of devotees, which are like these these flying monsters in the air. But if the wording comes through and he sees you fighting, he will also like start throwing enemies at you, and that can be a massive pain. I guess like another thing I can think of right off the back of my hand is I would say is too like the system is just too vague, and by that what I mean is that like stuff that should be explained better can probably be explained better. Like say the soul like so there's like two souls, so you get like your shards and then you have like the witcher the prayer souls. You kind of do events for them, or you do like a set list of demands for them, and you collect prayer shards, which are like Mask of Fallen Prayers. And once when you get like a set amount of shards or just souls, you I guess you get like something that can assist you. I don't really know, because I accidentally activated one shard or one ghost prayer without their shard. So I'm right now still looking for their shards in the area, and I'm still trying to get more souls for the other shards, or they're called essences. Yeah, this I guess I would say this is my overall thoughts. I'll probably be making more videos about Witchfire. This is my first video as well, so it's kind of scripted, it's kind of not. And just let me know what you think. If you like the video, just give it a like. If you want to subscribe, you can go ahead and subscribe too. And you just have a good day, y'all.